All right. Welcome to the Happy Hour Money Podcast. I am Josh Bennett, host part one of two. And with me is Isaiah Douglas. Isaiah, greetings.
Greetings. Cheers. I guess I am
Cheers.
host part two, which is the nicest thing you've ever said about me. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, got to lighten it up occasionally and give you some compliments,
Yeah.
But I think this is actually the first time we both in a while been, actually doing happy hour, even though we're recording this pretty late, but we're actually doing happy hour for once during our happy hour podcast, which is nice. It's not coffee.
Yeah. I was gonna say, well, it helps when it's not 9:30 or a random time that we record it in the mornings or something. So yeah,
exactly.
Try to stick away from drinking early in the day as much as I can.
That's probably a good life choice.
Yeah.
I'm no expert, but probably a good life choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have hopefully a fun episode, and sort of thought experiment for us. So for those of you who don't know, Isaiah and I are both financial planners by trade, and we sort of started this podcast as a way to impart financial wisdom. And a lot of times we talk about the things you can do to be successful, but we're taking a little bit different spin this time and taking a look at, all right, what are some of the biggest mistakes we see, or some of the biggest mistakes that we see people make, or that we think people make? So that way, hopefully you can listen to these mistakes and try to avoid them in your own situation. Just because mistakes are, obviously a blockade to achieving your financial goals. So along that vein, Isaiah, what are let's just start out with one. What's one of the biggest mistakes that you think people make in their personal finances?
I think it's not taking risks just in general, like especially early on. And so that can take a lot of different, I guess it can look at a lot of different ways. So it could be something like, okay, I'm just going to save my way to the different goals that I have. So I'm going to continue to work hard. I'm going to spend less than I make, and I'm going to save into, cash in the bank, and I'm going to accrue this cash balance, and that will help me get somewhere. And it's like, okay, they got even more than 50% of the hard part. Hard part is like not spending more than you make. And that's another issue that we can get into. So some people, they do a really great job on the hard part, which is, okay, I have income, I have expenses, I'm a net positive, I'm doing a good job, but then they don't do anything with that. And part of it is like, oh, well, I don't want to lose it. Like that's their thought. I don't want to lose it. And it's like, well, we can, talk about the insidious nature of, inflation and how it's criminal and it's theft and it's evil, but we don't have to necessarily go there on this podcast at the moment, right? But it is all those things. And you should always be asking, like, why do we need, inflation to have a well-functioning economy? And so you have to understand, like, what are the rules of the game? And at the moment, the rules state that if you're going to hold cash for a long period of time, you're not going to have the purchasing power that you think you have. And so you're just going to see that eroding away. Any thoughts on that? Because I think there's more on the risk side we can kind of unpack.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think I wholeheartedly agree. And I mean, I think there's a lot on the risk side that is worth chatting through. I mean, because obviously it has different definitions for different people, and there's a wide array of what risk really is. But along your line of thinking, I mean, our society as a whole, whether in the United States or abroad or wherever, is designed to reward risk takers. I mean, you look at the entire tax code, it's all tax deductions and things for people starting businesses, for doing real estate investments or real estate development projects, all these different things. A normal W-2 employee does not get that many tax benefits or anything because, again, the system is structured to incentivize you to take risks. And so if you're not taking calculated risks, keyword calculated risks, don't just be an idiot with with the risks you take, but taking calculated risks. If you're not doing that, well, then you're not doing what the system is encouraging you to do, and therefore you're not going to be rewarded. So, I mean, you have to take some risks, whether that's, in your career or in, investments or starting businesses or whatever. Otherwise, you're going to simply just be left behind by the system.
What is risk? How you define it? Because I think, we've said that, and it's a good thing, because I think you said, risk has a lot of different, shapes and sizes or definitions. How do we define risk?
Yeah. And I think it's a sort of a malleable definition depending on what we're talking about. So, I mean, a lot of people, I think, hear risk and investments or take risk. They think, oh, let me invest in this aggressive stock. That's not the case. I mean, sitting doing nothing could be, like you alluded to with inflation, that's a risk, risk of purchasing power loss. Obviously volatility and your money going up and down is a risk. Risk of capital loss is a risk, risk of, all sorts of different things, opportunity cost is a risk. Like, hey, I could have started this business, but I chose to play the safe card and somebody else started that business and now there's Facebook or whatever, We've all had that idea like, oh, I should have just done this and I could have been a billionaire, right? So opportunity cost is even a risk. So there's risk pretty much any way you look at it. But ultimately, the way I look at risk and the definition of risk I have is like, okay, what are the things we're comfortable with that we can use to sustain the life that we want to live? And what, and then you look at the lens of what is risk. So for example, if we want to live a comfortable life, well, you may need to take at least some risk. Otherwise, the purchasing power aspect of inflation could really come back to bite you. And that could be a stronger risk than volatility to you. So that's where it's going to differ a little bit to everybody, but that's kind of the way I view it. What about you?
I would say pretty similar. And yeah, it's like asking, what's an aggressive investment? Like your aggressive, my aggressive could be very different. And it's just so hard to kind of put your thumb on exactly what is risk. But I think it's a lot of times something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And, you hear any guru or the books about personal development, right? It's like you have to stretch yourself to like grow and do different things. And I think sometimes that's what risk is. And again, going back to the calculated term, I think that's the important piece. So just randomly doing stuff because, hey, this is really risky. That seems smart. Yeah, not what I would advocate for, but leaning into things where you can take the bet on yourself. Because at most employers, like you're going to be replaceable. And if you don't understand that, I think at some point it'll be sad to have that broken to you at some point. Like, and that should be the goal as an owner too, to where you're not so vital that the business can't run without you. Because if you can't have the business run without you, then you don't really have a business. You have a job that you are the kind of the superstar for. So you need to have it in look kind of both ways, where it's a compliment on one side and it's not on the other. But the other kind of risk that I was going to talk about, and you already hit on it, was starting a business or staying with, an employer that is the safe bet, or someone or somewhere, that you're not really utilized. And I think for a lot of people, they get stuck in the trap of, well, I'm only, went to college, or I have this training and I'm only, qualified to do X. And I think that like limiting belief or idea of I can't go do something else is not necessarily true, because there's so much education. It's like, shoot, if you took and were really interested in something that you wanted to dive into, there's so much free education. Like you could spend, 9 to 12 months, consume the content on, YouTube or podcasts or different things, and you could probably get 80% of the way there as anyone else, right? And be good enough to go do something. And I think that's really, really interesting. It's like, is there a passion and are you good at it? It's like you can be interested and you can really suck. So like, case in point, you like to do like some carpentry work. If I was like, oh, I'm really going to do that, and I'm horrible, can't make anything, right? Like Isaiah wants to really do this, he thinks it's cool, but just god awful, like no good. It's going to be hard to then charge, dollars or sats or whatever for my work if the doors don't open, right? Like, hey, yeah. Isaiah, you just aren't good at this. So it's like, you need to make sure that it's something that you actually are talented at, and everyone has that talent. They just got to kind of figure out and align that, because the idea of like chase your passions, or you'll never work a day in your life type thing is like I struggle with that one, because there's kernels of truth to it, but there's a lot of things that I don't necessarily think that's totally true.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's sort of a sidebar. I can't remember the exact statistic, but like Tim Ferriss has an anecdote about this in one of his podcasts or books. I can't remember, but basically it was something like and I'm probably gonna butcher the statistic, but it was something like around like, if you read at least 3 books on one topic, you're gonna be in the top 1% of experts in that topic, just because there are so few people that read a full book beyond like college, that to be way ahead of everybody else in a field, all you really need to do is read like 3 books on the topic. And I've actually along the lines of taking risks and changing careers, and from that type of taking risks, I've seen clients and friends that have been, let's say liberal arts major in college. And I had one guy I knew, he was a liberal arts major, ended up getting in finance, worked with me early in my days at Schwab, and then, ultimately left and became a programmer from doing like a little boot camp, and makes, buku bucks at tech companies now. So, I mean, yeah, that limiting belief can really be a risk in of itself, just for not, being willing to jump out of your comfort zone and try something new, and, something that could lead to, more lucrative ventures. I mean, there's another statistic that basically like the people that change jobs tend to make 50% more on average, because again, they're willing to put themselves out there and get out of that comfort zone to, sort of negotiate their worth. Whereas, a lot of employers out there aren't going to just hand you your worth. You have to go get it, which involves risks, right?
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, there's this threshold or this crossover where have family, have expenses, have these different things where if you make enough and you get comfortable enough, the risk, it feels like it's a lot more to go do your own thing. Where when you're younger and you don't have some of those things yet, it's a lot easier to go out and take that risk. And so it's not necessarily saying that you can't do it later on, but sometimes it's challenging. Things I've heard like, well, what about the benefits? What about health insurance? What about this? And it's like, yeah, those are all real things. And if you got people that rely on you, especially kids, like it's hard to then say, can I do this versus just suck it up and grind it out. And I think that, again, it's like easy to say you should go take the risk and do this thing, but sometimes it's like the real world adult answer is you need to just sacrifice and keep doing that, or you need to be willing to make the lifestyle adjustment to go make the move and make the change. And for some people, they don't want to make that adjustment because they don't want to take a step back. They don't want to curb some of the things that they're doing.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to your point, I think that's exactly why it's a mistake that really costs people, is because again, you have like to get ahead and get out of your rut or comfort zone. You have to be willing to make those choices. Otherwise, yeah, it is a limiting factor in your financial future. Just, I mean, whether it's a job change or whatever the case may be. And, I'm going to sort of push back and disagree with you on the idea that like some people have to make the decision not to do it. To me, that just means you have to get more creative in a lot of facets. I mean, for example, hey, I'm at a point in my life where I can go start a business. Okay, that's fine. Go buy a business that's already operating. You can like negotiate a seller finance deal where you literally have none of your money up front, entirely financed by the seller, could cash flow enough where you're replacing any salaries and potentially be way better off. Like there's all sorts of ways around every single problem, even if it's like, okay, I'm just changing a W-2 job. Okay, well, it's part of that. Like, especially if you have, bird in the hand, negotiate better benefits, negotiate better salary, negotiate like a signing bonus, where if you get a signing bonus, hey, your emergency funds just got boosted. And so, if it didn't work out, well, at least you have a higher, buffer on emergency funds to get the next job. So there's always a way if there's a will. But a lot of times the will just is lacking because we get comfortable. But to me, that's it. Yeah. Like you mentioned, that's a huge financial mistake, is letting yourself get comfortable.
I think that leads into the idea of just spending, because I think the idea of consumerism and just the things that we need versus things that we want, a lot of times it's like, okay, the lifestyle and the things that we do, it's like how much of that stuff is a need versus a want. And a lot of luxuries and extra things, again, great, nice to have, don't need it, right? So that there are levers to pull or things to change if someone really wanted to do that. It's just, is there enough pain and is there enough drive to want to make the change?
Yeah, for sure. Which along that lines, I think one of the other big mistakes that a lot of people make is not knowing where your money is going. And a lot of times people don't realize like how much fluff is in their budget, or things that they, it's money that's going to things that they don't value or doesn't add value to their life. I think that's like sort of the whole driving movement behind the whole like minimalism movement, is like, hey, there's a lot of things that we can cut out and still live a very fulfilled life. And I think a lot of people just kind of get so absorbed in keeping up with the Joneses or just what's going on in their life, where they don't ever sit down and realize like, hey, I'm spending, $5,000 a year on Starbucks, where a simple Keurig may save me $3,000 or something like that, just as an example.
You can do better than Keurig. I'm telling you, people, that's the worst way to drink coffee. You can do much better than Keurig.
Don't you insult my Keurig, sir.
Yeah, there's some major issues with Keurig.
That's where you get the little custom pods where you can put your own beans in.
Oh, there you go.
See, money saving and life hack. Get good beans, efficiency with Keurig, and cheap cost. Win-win. You still
have all the plastics, Josh, which is not good for you.
It's wire mesh, man. Come on.
No. But the whole machine itself, you have the plastic, so just that daily dose of microplastics in your coffee.
Yeah. When has plastics ever caused any harm?
Not that I'm some coffee snob, because we don't have a Keurig, but we still have like an old school drip plastic coffee maker, so it's still the same issues.
Yeah, it's still the same issue. Yeah, I got my Mr. Coffee too, but I love my Keurig, not gonna lie.
Yeah, but understanding where things are and at least taking a look at it. And I think we're both of the opinion, like, you don't have to be so granular from a budgeting standpoint where every single month you like sit down and spend all this time and like criticize spending, but you need to take some sort of inventory a couple times a year and just look at, okay, where are things going, and being on the same page, especially if you have a significant other, where and why and what are you solving for? And then are you aligning the things with that? What do you think for folks that are out there, whether it's an individual, family, like when you think about savings rates, what's a good goal? What's a stretch goal? When you think about, what percentage of my income should I be saving?
I mean, my typical rule of thumb is, at least 10%, but ideally 20. Like, I've worked with clients that have been, their goal has been to try and increase that savings rate as much as possible. Like, and I've seen clients that have like a 75% savings rate, which to me, at some point, you also got to live and enjoy life.
Agreed.
And that's where I think, 20% is a good number where you can do a lot of good investing, a lot of good savings with 20% of your income, pay off debt, whatever you need to do with that, protect your future, protect your kids' future, and you can still live. And I've seen sort of at every budget, this is possible. Obviously, if your lifestyle expectations or where you want your lifestyle to be doesn't necessarily match that right now, if you take that sort of short-term hit to your lifestyle to make sure you get these savings rates, well, then by having that discipline, you can start weaving yourself into a position through either investments or side hustles to where, you can have both. You can have the best of both worlds where you can have the good savings rate and, enjoy life a little bit more. But, first starts with having the financial discipline to do that. What are your thoughts?
I would agree with that. And I was just thinking, like, for someone that is a business owner, a lot of times it's like the reinvestment back in the business early on to get it to, the point where it is kind of that flywheel where it's going to continue to spit off cash flow. And they know that that's how they need to handle things for a while. Sometimes that does hamper the 20%. I think the rules for someone that has equity in that business or is the owner, you need to give yourself permission to say that it is going to be different, right? It doesn't have to be the same. Where if you are the wage earner, you work for someone else. Yeah, I think that 10 minimum, 20 ideal, and then anything above that is, gravy on top is great. And that's usually the same thing. It's like we almost work for the same company and think the same way. That's kind of funny how that works there.
Yeah, no, weird. It's almost like we planned it.
But yeah, I think the reinvestment into a business, depending on it's like, okay, what's the opportunity? What is, what kind of profit margins? What does a business like this sell for? And understanding like what you're solving for, like into the future. And can you reinvest back in the business over and above what you could pull it out and do something different with?
Yeah.
That changes things. Because it's like, oh, if you can go get that new piece of equipment or hire that salesperson or go do this other thing and it dramatically changes your business, like go do that versus go and save into, some index fund. Like that's probably going to give you more, bottom line revenue in return than pulling it out and saving it. Because any Tom, Dick, or Harry can save into an index fund. Not everyone can reinvest in a high quality business.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. What other mistakes do you think people make?
I mean, I had those three. I had spending, low savings rate, and not taking risks. So I've hit my list that I thought through.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I got some to add on that I'll throw out there, and one's a little bit more hippy dippy, if you will. It's sort of a philosophical belief, if you will. I mean, it kind of ties into a lot of different things, but a huge mistake I see people make is basically tying their value as a human to things that don't matter. And I'll kind of explain how this touches finances, but there's kind of two main scenarios where I see this play out. And one is the obvious one of keeping up with the Joneses, where people tie their value as a human to look how much stuff I have and look how pretty everything is and look what I can afford, compared to John Smith and Jane Smith across the street. I think so often people are buying things just to keep up with their neighbors or keep up appearances, where again, it doesn't add value to their life, isn't them, but somehow they tie their worth as a human into the possessions they own, as opposed to what they're doing in the world and the things that don't cost money or, really, again, add no value to their life. I think that's one of them. The other area I see this really come out and affect people's finances is through investments. We see it a lot with people that hold stock in their own companies that they're employed for, or by nature of just philosophical beliefs and things they have. Like, the one I beat up on a lot is Tesla. Like, there's this sort of mentality where like, hey, my self-worth is I have to identify as a tech person, and to identify as a tech person, and I also need to be environmentally friendly. So therefore I need to own Tesla stock, whether it makes sense for my investments or it's a good investment or whatever. Like, people sort of attach their value as the tribe they want to associate with to these investments. and without actually considering, is this a good investment? Same with like companies I work for. Hey, I want to be part of the tribe and I want to be valued as a employee or human that's part of this team. So therefore I need to have stake in this company, whether it's a good investment for me or my family, never considered. It's just, hey, I need to, have this as to be valuable in the company, which is not the case, right? So I see this transpire a lot where people get really emotionally attached to companies that don't fit what they're trying to do. Like they may tell me like, hey, I really want to be conservative or I really want to have this goal, but no, I don't want to sell my Tesla stock. And I just can never wrap my head around, okay, like what's the dichotomy here? Like you said, you told me you like really love and value this, but you don't want to sell the thing that can achieve this, because people tie their worth and their value to these kind of inanimate things, which is, it's harder to sort of recognize you're doing that. But one way to kind of think through it is easily like, hey, did my lifestyle creep up because I moved to a nicer neighborhood? Then hey, I might be keeping up with the Joneses and try to look at the stuff I have and whether it's adding value to my life, or like, hey, look at my investment portfolio. Are these things that actually, do I want to be invested in them because of their investment, reasons, not because of anything else, but just, is this a good investment for the goals I have? And if the answer is no, you probably might be suffering a little bit from that. But I think that's a mistake I see all the time. But I think it's harder for people to be self-critical enough to kind of put their finger on that themselves, if that makes sense.
Josh is a hater of Tesla. Anyone that's listened to this podcast more than a couple episodes knows Josh is just a hater of Tesla.
And to be clear, I'm not a hater of the idea of the being environmentally friendly and things like that. I'm a hater of that business model. I do not think is the best business model to make environmentally friendly investments realistic. And I think people have made it seem that way, and a lot of money is going to the wrong places, just to be clear.
It's perverse incentives. The whole idea of ESG and socially responsible investing most of the time is complete dog doo-doo. It's not actually doing anything, and it's more to feel like you're doing something versus actually doing something. So we can save that for another episode, but just to let everyone know, Josh definitely hates Elon and Tesla. He just shits on them all the time. But I mean, let's proofs in the pudding, right? Like, look at the returns, man. Look at the returns. That's the thing. It's going to go to the moon. It doesn't stop.
Well, and that's and part of the other bias.
Except it does.
With it. Yeah, that's the music's going to stop eventually, and that's my worry too. Is a lot of people are going to get hurt when the music stops, because there isn't a sustainable business model there that people think it is. But if you peel back the onion, now it's not there.
So I think it's just carbon credits. They don't make any money if they don't have government subsidies. There's no positive cash flow in the company. So
and like, even if you look at the model like of electric cars, I would argue some of the electric cars that are coming out now are, Tesla was definitely first to the market with like a good, sexy, electric vehicle. But I've seen some of the ones coming out, like they are much better looking than a lot of the Teslas, and just as good a mileage and all the I saw like the BMW one coming out. Looks incredible. The only thing Elon's hoping for is the AI stuff. But I think there's a lot of competitors in that space that could easily beat them to the market. But that's a whole different tangent that we can dive into at a different point. But but along that lines, like I think a lot of people have sort of gotten almost like a cult-like state around Tesla because of their belief in environment or whatever. The end result is going to be a lot of people get hurt because of that sort of devotion without really further thought into it. And that's sort of why I think, tying your belief system to any particular investment is not a good idea. If you want to be environmentally friendly, there's thousands of startups with really cool technology that need money to actually make a huge difference. Like that's where the money should be going, on to Tesla, if that makes sense.
Yeah. If people want to be environmentally friendly, they should own Bitcoin. That's the most environmentally friendly ESG. If you actually look at what ESG stands for, thing that you could save into. I wouldn't categorize it as an investment, but one of the best things that people can do. And you may laugh and chuckle, but there's a lot of truth to it. So
there's definitely gonna be people like shaking their heads and arguing with you there. But
we can link, and we could probably have a whole episode on that topic. But
actually, I think it would be an interesting episode to kind of talk through, because there is some fascinating tech in the space. Actually, I think doing a whole environmentally friendly or like ESG kind of conversation around what is ESG and some of the peeling back the onion on that, I think would be super valuable too, just because there's a lot of misnomers out there and a lot of bad info.
We should bring on Travis and just have me and him shout at each other for an hour. It'll be great.
Sounds good.
No, but yeah, I think that actually would. And I would imagine people would be interested in a conversation that gets to that, but trying to stick on topic, which don't do a great job at times.
Yeah, we never do a good job of that, but we try.
You had, I didn't think it was hippy dippy though. I mean, as far as tethering and trying to ensure that you don't, get so devoted to a specific investment because you think, XYZ reasons, and making sure that it actually aligns with what you believe in, super important. I don't think that's super hippy dippy. What other kind of topics or things did you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other big one that I have that I see cause some pretty devastating outcomes is not having an estate plan. Estate plans are one of those things that no one wants to think about or talk about, and are so often overlooked in people's finances. And that, I think, is a huge problem, just because for those of you who aren't aware, an estate plan is basically, if something happens to you or your family, like what happens to your money, your assets, your kids, all those different things. And I would assume most people out there, especially if you have kids, don't want the government necessarily deciding what happens to your kids. And, the assumption a lot of times too is like, oh, I have life insurance through work, I'm all set, I don't need an estate plan. Well, I mean, I know I definitely saw this during COVID. I'm sure you did too, Isaiah, but like I saw a situation where someone lost their job because of COVID and layoffs, then caught COVID, passed away from it, had no life insurance, no estate plan, nothing. And, their spouse came to us trying to basically figure out what the heck was going on. And, this was in California too, where there was like basically a 4-year wait to get through probate court. And so like, this poor lady is like, only halfway, 2 years later, only halfway through, going through probate courts to get these assets. And so, I mean, just not having these things in place can be just an absolute nightmare for families. It's less around the money aspect. I mean, obviously the money piece of it's important, but, having something like that in place can just wreck a family financially, or, especially emotionally. Just no one wants to deal with that when they're also grieving.
Yeah. You don't have to be rich to need an estate plan. I think that's the key thing, that a lot of people are like, oh, that's for people that have like X amount of money. It's like, no, normal people need an estate plan, and it's not as expensive or as wild, and it doesn't need to be super complex, but like get the basics in place. And I know no one woke up yesterday and was like, damn, I can't wait to like go get an estate plan. That sounds awesome. That's where I want to spend my money. Like that doesn't ever go through anyone's head. And I feel like, and I hate the term adulting. Like, I just hate that term. It's so stupid. People should stop using it. But feeling like I was adulting, right, was when I signed estate documents on my birthday, right? Because it was the day I had free time. And I was like, oh yeah, we can go sign those documents this day. So, I mean, sometimes it's just like, shoot, you got to make the decisions that are best for other people and just suck it up and get it done. So if you're listening to this, you haven't done your estate plan, add that to the top of the to-do list for 2023 and just quit making excuses. Like, you just got to do it. And the beauty of it is Josh and I both are estate planning attorneys, and we don't play one on TV. So we're just telling you that you need to get this shit done. Like, it's important.
Yeah. That's really all it is. I'm just, and as, kind of speaking through mistakes, again, this one's not the most financial mistake, but I mean, in my career, the hardest conversations I've had and the worst situations I've had to deal with in finances, and that's through, working through the 2008 crisis and COVID and all these different things. Like, hey, I lost all my money in crypto, has nothing compared to like, my spouse just passed away and I have no idea where their money is. Like, I don't know how to pay my bills, all these things. Like, those conversations are the worst conversations for us to ever have. And so like, it's one of those things you never want to like think about that situation, or like everyone's like kind of like, oh, that's, I'm 25 or 30. I got a ways till I need to think about that. Right. Life happens, shit happens, no one wants to ever wake up outside and be like, oh yeah, my spouse is in a coma and I should have gotten that, health power of attorney so I can make decisions for them instead of going to the courts to get decisions. Yeah, they're just things you need in place because shit happens in life and you want to be able to take care of the ones you love, either financially, emotionally, whatever. But it's just one of those things, like anytime we have these conversations, it's always because something horrible happened. And, and it's only made more horrible by not being prepared for life to happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about like not knowing where things are or what's going on. And I am a very strong believer in self-custody. And, if you own Bitcoin, or if you want to be a shitcoin or own other crypto assets and you want to self-custody or whatever, you need to have people around you that the best security is not taking it to your grave and then no one be able to access it. So if it's a material part of what you have, you need to make sure the people behind you or people that can be left can figure out where the heck things are. So however you decide to do that, but it is something that's super important. Like you can't, like it's no good if you own 1,000 Bitcoin and you pass away and they just are gone. Like that's not helping anyone. And so you need to make sure, yes, security is important. You want to do the right thing from a privacy perspective, but you also can't just not have it be there for the people that are behind you. Like that's super important. So it's a tricky fine line to walk, but you got to figure out a way to do it.
I mean, the question to kind of think about with this, and this is a question I ask clients all the time, is like, all right, if you died tomorrow, would your spouse know what to do? And more often than not, the answer is like, no. Like, could they get into my computer and email bosses or whatever? No. Could they get access to crypto? No. Or what about financial accounts or whatever the case may be? No. There's all these things that like more often than not people don't realize because we just operate in life and don't necessarily think about our demise. We don't know if our spouse can necessarily knows our passwords or can get into, because I know like in my household, at least most of the households I dealt with, like some bills may be in one spouse's name, some may be in the other, or like I know all the passwords to my things, but Danny could log into my stuff and try to log in and have zero idea what the passwords are to different things. So like, we essentially, like I set up LastPass, so she only needs to know like one password just to get into my password like log, but it's those type of things that people just don't think through. And there are easy fixes if you plan ahead, but just ask yourself like, hey, if I fell over dead tomorrow, what would happen with my spouse and my stuff? And most likely the answer is like, oh yeah, I need an estate plan. That's probably going to be the answer. But yeah, any other mistakes that are coming to the top of your mind? I know we could probably talk about small mistakes and stuff for days, but I mean, those are the ones that I've seen that have kind of the biggest overall impact is, are those kind of ones that we've already talked about.
Yeah, I would just say, closing thoughts are figuring out what risks are the ones that have payoffs. So kind of look at, is this and I like this term, even though I think some people might like, it sounds like a fancy word, but like asymmetry. I love that word because it's like, okay, do the benefits outweigh the setbacks, right? And so if you can find those type of risks to take where it's asymmetrical, where the payoff is so much bigger than what the downside is, take those. And you should, whether it's investing in yourself, starting a business, whatever, right? Like take those risks. And I think that's the biggest thing that I would leave people with is look at the asymmetry of things that are out there. And investing and betting on yourself is usually pretty good.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I guess the parting wisdom I would leave is, along that lines, or I guess sort of tangential, a lot of us shoot for the moon in terms of returns and the upside, but a lot of times you can get as much return on your personal finances just by the mistakes that you prevent. So really looking for your blind spots, whether it's risks that you should be taking that you're not, or things you should be doing in your finances that you're not. Really look to your blind spots and see what those things are. And if those can be prevented, well, hopefully it's a loss you never have to deal with, but you won't know if hopefully you won't have to find out because you went ahead and prevented them by looking through your blind spots. So anyways, that's our parting wisdom. So until next time, we hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. If this is the last time you listen to us before the holidays, but otherwise we'll see you next go around. Cheers.
Cheers.